Our next webinar is with Stuart Watt, who is the Senior Commercial Director at Loqate. Stuart will talk us through the importance of data and user experience in building relationships with supporters and ultimately maximising fundraising at this critical time. In this session, you'll discover how the pandemic has impacted supporter behaviour and how you can survive in this changed landscape, ways to boost your online donation conversions and create a fast, frictionless experience for supporters, tips for maximising data quality to enhance marketing efforts and increase regular giving, how to access Loqate's benchmark report to see how you compare to other charities. And as always, we will be having Q&A at the end, and you can start submitting your questions anytime you want by clicking on the button that looks like two overlapping text boxes. I keep on harping on about this, but I'm sure you all know where it is, on the bottom right-hand side of the display. I do encourage you to keep those discussions going. It's fantastic. We are all here to share, to learn from each other. Give your thumbs up to the questions that you would like to vote for. So over to you, Stuart. Welcome and thank you for joining us live.
Excellent. So hopefully you can all see my screen. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. We've got 30 minutes together now. I'm going to be talking for 20 minutes and then time for Q&A at the end. I've got to say, I've just watched such an exceptional session with Ellie Thompson about inclusion and accessibility. Anybody that didn't watch that, absolutely go and do it. We're doing so much in this area, and I've just learned that we've got so much more to do, and certainly from a personal point of view, and that's going to be evidenced from the slides that I'm about to show. So I'm here live, so I won't be able to add into the conversation as you go in, but I'd hugely encourage you, please get into the chat, introduce yourselves. If there's anything that I say that you agree with, comment on that. If there's anything that you disagree with, the same, it adds to discussion, and that's where I think we'll get the value. And put all of those questions and we'll discuss those at the end, and then also from the networking in Reno. I wanted to start this, I'll introduce myself shortly, but I wanted to start this with a piece of insight that we found from a research exercise that we did recently, which has a massive impact on probably everybody that's watching this now. And one of the questions that we asked was about changing behaviours. And we found that of all of those people supporting charities through voluntary giving and regular giving, 29% have now actually reduced or stopped the amount of money that they're giving. And obviously that's got a huge impact on all of you. Without money coming in, then it stops the great work that you need to do. So I'm going to be sharing with you some further insights from that research paper, and also probably most useful, this is what we were asked to spend more of our time on, 3 simple technology changes that you could make that could increase your conversions when supporters or members turn up at your website by 26%. And they're tech changes that you should all be able to make. Some operational changes that you could make that could increase regular giving by 8%. And then I wanted to share right at the end an offer that we want to make to all of you that could certainly put to bed some of the worry and the risk, the worry and the fear that you might have about fears of GDPR and ICO regulator fines. So that's what we're going to be going through. Right, I said I'd introduce myself. I'm one of the directors. I've been working in this sector for something like about 15 years now. That's our mission as an organization. And I appreciate that it might not be as compelling or as world-changing as some of yours, but we get excited because we get to help organizations like yours. So our mission is to help every business in the world reach every customer in the world. Well, for you guys, it's helping every charity in the world reach every supporter or member or activist in the world. And that's the first time that you engage with them, and then every subsequent time that you might want to communicate with them. So what do we do and what are we famous for? There's a list of charities that use our technology and use our services. I was asked a question. I was talking at the Third Sector Conference 2 weeks ago, and I was asked a question, well, is it only available or useful for organisations of those sizes, WWF or UNICEF? No, absolutely not. We've got some of the smallest hospices within the UK that use our technology and are paying just £25 a year to use it and to benefit from it. So what is it? It's the probably best way that I can explain it is our technology sits behind the websites of over 19,000 organisations around the world, and the majority of those are within the UK. And if you think about last night or over the last week, if you've been signing up on a website for a newsletter or making a purchase, as you enter your personal details, title, forename, surname, and address details, that information goes through our technology to verify that it's correct and to format it before it ends up with the charity or the business. So it's our technology makes it easy for individuals to provide that information and makes it accurate for those businesses that capture it so they can then use it on an ongoing basis. If I talk about some numbers, well, there's a few. I'll try to make it easy for everybody. We've got 500 different data sets that we capture and we hold within our business that are all onboarded through our privacy and legal team to make sure that they're all held compliantly and only used as they should be. And then that information is served out as insight to those 19,000 businesses through one platform. And the amount of records, individuals that are entering details through that platform, 25 billion requests every year, and that equates to 70 million every day. So that gives us a unique view, if you like, a window on the worlds of the different sectors, and we get to see exactly what's happening within the not-for-profit space, and I'll come on to that shortly. So the research paper that we conducted recently, right at the end of this session, I'm going to be sharing with you a link where you can go and download that. And from the Third Sector, we first launched that to the Third Sector show a couple of weeks ago, and the feedback was great. So I definitely encourage you to go and get that. So there's 4 questions here. There was more that were asked, but here's 4. The first one, the point that I mentioned at the start, since the pandemic started, how have your behaviours changed? And what we found was 27% of people that were donating have now either stopped or reduced what they give. 10% are giving more, so some charities potentially doing well out of this, and no change from 62%. So it'd be really good actually if you could type into the chat box how that's affected yours. Has your voluntary income gone up, gone down, or is it the same? Might put people at ease if you know that you're in the same boat as others. What we also saw is that there's a change in the sorts of charities that people are supporting. 47% are more inclined now to support the smaller local charities that can make a difference in the communities that you live in. 27% are more inclined to support the smaller national charities, and it looks like the larger charities, the larger national charities, are the ones that maybe suffered through the pandemic. 35% prefer to donate through online payments, 33% cash, so that's about the same. And you'll have to download the paper to look to see how the remaining 30% prefer to pay, whether that's Bitcoin or other methods. And how are people preferring to receive the communications? Email is still at the top, followed by post, direct mail. And I mean, we work an awful lot with the Royal Mail, and actually the post, people are preferring to receive postal communications rather than email. That's a trend that we're seeing, and certainly right across the world. Just if you look at Amazon as a business, the poster boy of digital communications, digital retail, they've actually now created a catalogue of sending out catalogues to their customers because they recognise that's how people like to receive their communications. So like I said, at the end, I'll share the link that you can go and download that whole paper and find out everything else that people are saying. Here's a stat though that I absolutely think is relevant. It comes from a recent Vance and Bourne study, and that's that 92% of us, when we're online, we expect, in fact, more than that, we don't just expect, we demand a fast, frictionless experience that's trustworthy and secure. So just think about when you turn up at a website, if it's clunky, if it's difficult to navigate, it's likely that you'll abandon and you'll go and do something else. So that's what we demand. Well, we were presenting at the Akivo Fest conference just before Christmas. So many of you will be familiar with Akivo, the Association for Chief Executives within Voluntary Organisations, and we ran a poll, and we found that only 33% of charity chief execs believe that their websites are optimised and provide a fast, frictionless experience. So there's a disconnect there, isn't there? 92% of individuals, supporters, members, activists demand it, but actually only 33% of charities are providing it. I'll come on to some tips to improve that. And then secondly, another survey that we saw, this one from Ipsos, and that's that the majority of consumers, 57% consumer supporters, are more likely to react positively to brands that demonstrate a commitment to complying with data protection. So, and this is a trend that's growing as we become more aware of data protection because of everything that the ICO are doing. And again, when we look at what Akivo members said, 66% of these charity chief execs said that they're not confident that they're providing this, not confident in the quality, the accuracy of the information that they hold, not quality that they're meeting these regulations. And 53%, so just slightly more, actually believe that improving in this area could have the most significant impact on increasing fundraising revenue. So there's a couple of stats that what we're seeing in the market. So what are we seeing organisations in this space, in the not-for-profit space, doing to address some of these issues? Some of these are our opinions, but mostly what we're seeing as being the best practice, if you like. So the first one, and it's a really, really key thing, really, don't insist on registration. Make it simple for individuals when they first turn up at your website. You'll see some websites, they ask for so much information, they ask for individuals to set up accounts. It makes it clunky and it makes it slow. And remember, 92% expect it to be friction-free. Just provide a guest experience. Just basically ask for as little information as possible on that first transaction. And then once you've delighted that individual and you've shown that you're a professional organization, on the next interaction, maybe ask for a bit more information. And then the next interaction, that's a great user experience. So that's the first thing. Make it simple on that first transaction. There's some great experiences of this, and we'll have all seen that. The second, reduce form fields on websites. So this is the amount of information that you're asking for. The average from all of the websites that we see when businesses come to us is 14. Businesses and websites ask for 14 pieces of information. And I'll show you some great examples in a second where you only need to ask for 5. So what's the impact for asking too much? Well, when we look at abandonment rates, and like I said, we're seeing 70 million transactions every day, 26% of those individuals that abandon a website where you may be asking somebody to buy something or make their first donation, abandoned because of the number of forms that are being that you're asking people to complete. Well, if you work out the numbers, if you reduce that and you solve that 26% abandonment rate, you can increase your conversion rate by 35%. That's huge. Think about what it would mean to your organization if you could increase the number of people that either sign up for a newsletter or make their first donation by 35%. Just do it by reducing the forms that you ask people to complete. So I said I'd share a couple of great examples. Here you go, one from UNICEF, one from Age UK. We could have chosen some smaller ones. That's the amount of information that you need to ask for. Email, title, forename, surname, and then address, just to get through that first transaction. So, and now both of these organizations are using type ahead functionality, and you'll have seen this on websites now where you just start typing your address, and then we, as our technology, can actually work out, narrow it down, and then just give you 1 or 2 to select from. That actually reduces the number of keystrokes, the number of types you need to type at your keyboard by 76%. Now, if you remember those numbers, 26% of people abandon because it's taking too long. Use type ahead functionality and you can reduce keystrokes by 76%. So second tip, reduce the amount of information you're asking for. And the third tip, and this is really easy as well. Most websites are designed to be viewed on desktops, but actually think about people that visit your website. Are they accessing it from a PC, a tablet, or a mobile? When we talked about these 70 million transactions, we actually get to see what devices people are using. 5 years ago, the split was 85% access websites from PCs and 15% from mobile. It's now flipped the other way. It's 60% of individuals access websites from mobiles and 40% from desktop. So get the website optimized so that you can access it through a mobile and you're not needing to tab through all different displays. I sit on a parish council and I'm a committee member at a local village cricket club. We did that very simply by the company that manages those websites for us, and it makes it easy for people that access it from mobiles. You don't need to be a big business to do that. So in summary, to increase conversions, making it easy for people that turn up at your website, keep it simple, offer a guest checkout. The second one, reduce the fields to reduce that abandonment rate. And then the third, think about the devices that people are accessing your websites from and optimize the website so it's simple when people arrive at a mobile. So there's 3 tips that we're seeing businesses doing really well with best practice. So that's great. You've now got somebody turned up at your website, provided your details, you can now share with them whatever information you need to and that they want you to. But how do you then maintain that relationship with the supporters or members moving forwards? Well, there's a problem, and this is the problem. Consumer data decays on average 20% per annum. Now let's just put that in context. If 100 people turned up at your website today and signed up for a newsletter, in 12 months' time, you'd only be able to communicate with 80 of them. And then you start thinking about, well, what does that mean to you as an organization? Where does the 20% come from? Well, 11% of the population move house per annum, and that's growing, by the way. 14% of the population change jobs a year. It's a bit higher than you'd think, isn't it? Well, what we're finding is that more people now provide their business mobile or their business email address. Well, as they change jobs, that information doesn't move with them. And then we all know about the mortality rate and what's happened there this year. So data decay is a problem. What does that mean to you as an organization? Well, like I said, I've been doing this for 15 years. The biggest impact always used to be revenue. How can you incentivize or encourage individuals to maintain that relationship with you and support, make donations, make purchases if you're not in contact with them? So the first thing is, if you can't contact them, it will have an impact on your revenue. If you've got inaccurate data on your supporters or your members, that's wasteful. It costs 50 pence on average to send something through the post. If you've not got the right address for them, it's not going to get opened and it's wasteful. The costs are smaller for email, but there are costs. So they were always the number 2, the top 2. But more recently, the biggest factor that we're seeing is that organizations want to maintain accurate data to meet requirements of the Information Commissioner. Article 5, some of you might know this, says that any information that you hold on an individual needs to be up to date and accurate. Well, difficult, what does that mean? Up to date and accurate, and then rectified where not. So this seems to be the biggest fear, and that's when I said right at the end, I'll share with you an offer that could well address this. So they're the impacts of it. 3 tips that we're seeing organizations do to solve these. The first one, that statement, what gets measured gets done. So many businesses over the years haven't seen the importance of maintaining accurate supporter databases or lists. Actually measure it. How many supporters have you got on your database? How many can you communicate? Is having an accurate email address important, or an accurate postal address? What was the accuracy last quarter compared to this quarter? Is it getting better or is it getting worse? And share this amongst the organization. Have everybody within your organization understanding the importance, if you're on the phone to somebody, of double checking that you've captured their email address correctly. I'll give you a great example here. This is what one charity is doing, and they update this on a quarterly basis. They've worked out what's important to them. So I'll share a few things there. How many supporters have they got on their database? How does that compare to last quarter to now? How many supporters on a household? How many of those supporters can they communicate by email? Have they got the correct consent for? How many have they got a correct telephone number for? And then what's the value of the database? If you actually work out what the value of a regular supporter is rather than a one-off giver, actually work that out, those averages, based on how many you can communicate. What's the value today? What's it going to be next quarter? So start thinking about measuring it. That's the first one. The second point, automate the processes that you put in place. And I appreciate there's going to be some organizations here with potentially a list of 500 supporters, and there'll be some with millions. But what I used to see 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago, people just used to try to address this once a year or once every 2 years. Things have changed now. And what we're seeing best practice is, rather than having an accurate database today that then gets worse and worse and worse over time. So if you run a campaign in 12 months' time, you're only going to be able to communicate with 80%. Actually, do this more frequently and put a process in place. It costs no more to do. Actually maintain that on a weekly or monthly basis. It means that you've got an up-to-date, on-demand database that you can run a campaign to straight away without having to start thinking about which data, how you're going to improve this data quality before you do it. We're seeing that on average, it's reducing the time to run a campaign from 5 days, because you're having to work with businesses like us, to 5 minutes. The data is always ready. And we know from all of the marketing principles that timeliness is so important. It's so important that you get messages out when the content is going to resonate with those individuals. And that will give you a much improved conversion rate and all the metrics about that you'll get from those campaigns. So the second is automate and do more regularly. The third tip, so this follows on from what Ellie was talking actually about inclusion. We all know, we've probably heard of the golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated. That was a great rule to live by. But actually more these days, it's treat others how they want to be treated. Start thinking about the individuals. Well, from a campaign selection point of view and a database point of view, start thinking about the different types of people within your database in terms of cohorts or segments. There's an example there, that's from one charity that we work with, where they've got 28 different types of individuals. There's activists, there's active regular givers, one-off givers, legacy supporters, warm campaigners, lapsed campaigners. And what you can do is actually invest differently with different processes against those different types of individuals. I can share with you a statistic. We work with one charity where a regular giver is worth £150 per annum to them. A one-off giver is worth £50. You have to think about return on investment here. It makes more sense to invest more money to stay in contact with somebody that is worth £150 to you per annum than it is somebody that's worth £50. This charity here, they've not got 28 different processes, they've got 4, and each of those different supporters. So just start thinking about, and you can flag your database with the different types of supporter here. And start thinking about the return on investment. And right at the start, I said, if you implement some of these processes, you can improve the income that you get. Staying in contact with your regular givers, when we see it from the charities that do it, will increase their voluntary income by 8% per annum. So that's the third tip that I'll give there. So a summary: the first, work out what's important, measure it, and measure it regularly, and start setting objectives around it. The second, don't just look at this once or twice a year. It costs no more to do it monthly. Set up a process so that you've got a database that's always ready to campaign to. And then the third, the platinum rule: start thinking about the different segments or cohorts of individuals within your database and treat them differently. So that would be the 3 tips. I said that there was an offer. If you saw at that benchmarking report, the great example, there was something in there that said that they were 9th best overall across all the charities within the UK. What we do as an organization, when we improve the data quality, we also, because we see data from so many different organizations, we can actually say where you as an organization fit in a league table. It's all done anonymously, but we can basically say, are you in the top 10% or in the bottom 10%? If you're in the top 10%, good on you. What you're doing now is working. Make sure you know what you're doing and keep doing it. If you're in the bottom 10%, do you know what? You need to probably do something different, because it'll be costing you money. You won't be staying in contact with your supporters. And importantly, if the ICO were to come and knock on your door, it would be difficult to evidence and demonstrate that you've got processes in place to maintain the accuracy. So we're willing to provide, we provide these reports free of charge, and it basically says what the state of your data is, how accurate it is, what you can do to fix it if you choose to, but importantly, where you sit on that league table. Are you at the top, at the bottom? And based on that insight, do you want to do something differently? That would be your call to make. So you can get that from the link that I'm going to show you now. And this is the report. And I strongly, based on the feedback that we got from the third sector presentation, I strongly suggest and recommend that you go and download this, www.loqate.com, Loqate spelled LOQATE.com/charity-challenge. It's a free report. You can get that, and there's some great insights in it. That, I think, is my time up. Hopefully you've been submitting some questions, and any second now, Elizabeth is here to put some questions to me.
Yes, I am. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stuart, for your presentation. Thank you. So let's move over to the questions. If you haven't submitted your burning question, please do so in the Q&A section. And any questions that we won't have time to pick up now, then you can follow up with Stuart in the Remo straight after. Okay, let us now go to a question from Claire. And how do you capture data preferences if only 5 fields on a form? Surely better to capture this at the point of transaction rather than as a follow-up.
Absolutely, we do quite a bit of work about preference centres, and there's other organisations that specialise exactly in that. So you might have come across a business called My Life Digital, and I'll give you an example about preference questions. It was Claire that put that one. They're not a charity, they're an energy provider. And what they were able to work out was that an individual that they have consent for is worth, in monetary terms, 10 times more than an individual that you haven't got consent for. So it's so important that you do get that consent to meet all of the requirements. It's an interesting question. That one, we're getting into the privacy point here. Everything that we do is about capturing accurate information so that you can retain that privacy question around preferences for whichever channel it is something, it's not something that we specialize in. And I wish I could probably provide more guidance on that than I probably can.
Yeah, so shall we just skip over then, Stuart, to the one that's a little bit further down that says any tips? Any tips to reduce form field? So that sort of follows on, doesn't it, to the question that you've just answered?
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to capturing address information, so the old way that we used to do this, if we think before technology like ours was available, you used to ask for the number of your property, the first line of your address, the second line, the third line, the fourth, the town, the postcode, the county. And before you know it, you've got 40, and then you're asking for title, forename, surname. Then you're asking for a mobile number, a landline number, an email address. You can actually, if the address field, you can actually reduce address field to just one. So rather than having 6 lines of address, you can reduce that to 1 by just having type ahead functionality. Could be our technology or other technology that's available. Asking for telephone number. People have a preferred telephone number. Rather than asking for mobile and landline, potentially just ask for 1. Yeah. Okay, good. We've got a question from Danielle up at the top. Our volunteer form on our website has about 15 fields. So this is continuing with a field. This is about average, isn't it? This includes name, address, area volunteer, inquiry, along with 3 referee details. We need these details in order to recruit a volunteer. Is there any way we can reduce this at all? Well, I think it's an interesting point. The point that we were trying to, that I was trying to make is that there's a 26% abandonment rate if you ask for too much information at that first interaction that you've got with them. And it's when you start to think, because what you want to provide is a great service. Certainly with volunteers, you want to be able to provide them with all the information that they need. So it's very easy to start asking for too much information so that you can provide a tailored communication. But if you make it too difficult, people are, just remember that number, 26% abandoned. So potentially reduce it as much as you can and make sure that you've got the correct preferences, and then ask them that information on the second interaction. Yeah. So because you've got their contact, if you've got their consent to communicate with them, then start asking those, because you've reduced that 26% abandoned. And it's absolutely crucial that you ask that information, but don't think about asking it all at that first time.
Okay, good point. Very good point. Okay, moving over to Jake. How do we ensure we know about the 20% decay and deal with that? For context, things like open rates on newsletters or marketing campaigns dropping.
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so the 20% is the average that we see. And we work with a lot of organizations where we can say, this is the state of the data today, and this is what it was 12 months ago. So, and we know it's 20%. It changes, by the way, depending on what the demographics of the individuals in your database are. So what you tend to find is if you've got a very young profile of individual, they tend to be a more transient individual. So you'll get more people moving and more people changing jobs. And it's the opposite as you get a more elderly individual in the database. The only way that you can really find out is when I shared with you that report, is actually run that report through. We give that benchmark score saying this is how you compare to all the other charities. And then what you do is we actually break it down and say, of the 5,000 addresses that you submitted, 90% are accurate, 10% are inaccurate. Same with telephone numbers and email addresses. So you get a state of the nation today, and then it'll say, if you want to go ahead and improve these and invest in it, this is where you can actually get it to. So it's that report, the benchmark report will give you everything you need. I think that's, hopefully it's answered the question.
Yes, I think so. I think so. We've got a few more questions there, Stuart. So I'm going to now take a break at this stage because it's the time. Thank you so much for answering these, and thank you for our lovely attendees for listening and participating as well.